My son inherited my husband's language talent. At just 6 years old, he was already fluent in 8 languages. He and his father would often chat in foreign languages right in front of me. Today, while we were walking through the mall, my son pointed at my stomach and said in German, Mama, der Bauch ist groß. Mom's belly is so big. My husband smiled and replied in French, On peut mettre un cochon. We could fit a pig inside. My son doubled over laughing, mocking me in Italian. La mamma è un maiale. Mom is a pig anyway. I turned to ask them what they were saying, but on second thought, I decided not to. Even if I asked, they wouldn't tell me. Instead, they would just look at me with sneers, telling me to guess or look it up online. I simply quickened my pace, stopped in front of a luggage store, and said to the clerk, Give me the largest suitcase you have, please. After the father and son came out of the mall restroom, they went to get ice cream. Seeing me still picking out a suitcase at the storefront, they finally walked over looking annoyed. Julian said, What are you buying a suitcase for? It's not like you're going on a trip. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him curling his lip, mockingly imitating the way I squatted down to show our son. Leo laughed so hard his mouth wouldn't close. The ice cream in his hand dripped onto the white denim jeans I had just washed for him. He flinched instinctively, but then, seeing his father backing him up, all fear vanished. He didn't even bother to move his legs, letting the ice cream melt and run down his pants. I turned my head away, not wanting to watch the scene that was making my blood pressure spike. Instead, I kept discussing the details of the suitcase with the store owner. Seeing me ignore him, Julian asked again. Clara, are you mute? You don't speak foreign languages, but did you forget English too? I didn't see what was so funny about that. But hearing it, Leo burst into laughter again. A wave of disgust washed over me. For the first time, I wondered if there was something wrong with my own son's head. To avoid making a scene in the mall, I explained that our old suitcase at home was worn out, and I was just replacing it. Julian gave a dismissive grunt, then pulled Leo toward the arcade on the second floor. He was always like this. He never asked questions because he wanted answers. He just wanted me to submit to his rules. In his eyes, I was not allowed to ignore him, and I was not allowed to disobey. Naturally, it wasn't just me. Everyone in this family had to obey his commands. He was a male chauvinist. Before we got married, I actually thought that was a good thing. I was indecisive and weak-willed. So my mother had suggested I find a strong, capable man to spend the rest of my life with. Then I found him. He was indeed very efficient. From daily meals to buying our house, to which school our child should attend, and what extracurricular classes to sign up for. Whenever he saw me struggling to decide, he would make the best choice for me. Our life together had seemed pleasant enough. But ever since we discovered our son's language talent, cracks began to slowly appear in our lives. Julian wanted Leo to learn as much as possible. He signed him up for French, German, Mandarin, Italian, Japanese, and Korean. Recently, seeing how fast Leo was learning, he added Spanish and Swedish. I felt terrible for our son, and tried to convince Julian not to push him so hard, warning him it might backfire. But he wouldn't listen. He lectured me on how this was for Leo's future, hinting that I simply didn't know how to raise a child. Because Leo spent so much time with him, he gradually started harboring resentment toward me too. Everything I did was wrong. Anything I did made him angry. Even today, fearing he was cooped up studying too much, I brought him to the mall, only for him to complain the entire way that I was ruining his study time. It was obvious. I was despised by both my husband and my son. Over the years, it wasn't that I hadn't tried to fit in, but I really couldn't learn those foreign languages. Even though I memorized vocabulary until midnight, carrying word cards while working or doing chores, I just couldn't retain them. But Leo only had to look at a word once to remember it. He would then laugh at me, calling me the stupidest person in the house. Over time, my confidence was crushed, and I decided to stop trying. I resigned myself to taking care of the housework and being their support. But as time went on, I became nothing more than a maid in their eyes. Aside from sentences like, Mom, I want steak tonight, or Clara, where are my socks? They had no other communication with me. Their attention was never on me. Even when I cut my hand while chopping vegetables, or got my foot caught in the elevator door, they didn't even bother to spare me a glance. I was utterly sick of it. In this home, I felt zero love. And on top of that, I had to constantly endure their malicious mockery. During dinner, if Julian wanted to test Leo's language skills, he would suddenly ask him, Leo, how do you say Mom's cooking tastes awful in Korean? Leo would think for a moment, then getting a bright idea, reply, 엄마가 만든 음식은 정말 맛이 없다. And just like that, Leo would be rewarded with screen time on his computer. Or before bed, Julian would suddenly quiz Leo, asking him to translate a Japanese sentence into English. 母は日本の女性によく似ている. Leo didn't understand the underlying meaning of the sentence, but he translated it word for word anyway. His childish voice echoed in the bedroom. The translation is, my wife is just like an old-fashioned Japanese housewife. Then Leo asked curiously, Daddy, are Japanese housewives as ugly and submissive as mommy? Julian's eyes flashed with a knowing gleam. He raised an eyebrow and said maliciously, "You'll understand when you grow up." Hearing their conversation, I naturally felt sick to my stomach. I pulled Julian into our room, complaining about why he had to do that, why he was teaching our son such things, and why he was always targeting me. But Julian didn't feel he had done anything wrong at all. He replied unreasonably, "What? Are you saying I don't know how to raise my own kid? Fine, you raise him then." He knew very well that Leo never listened to me. Saying this was nothing short of a provocation and a show of power. I backed down, uttering a few useless words about not doing it again, and then covered my face with the blanket and went to sleep. Only today, I suddenly didn't want to hide under the blanket anymore. I had always deliberately pretended not to care, hiding myself away to lick my wounds. But in reality, it hurt deeply. I couldn't discipline my son, and I couldn't get respect from my husband. I was a failure, an absolute failure. That was why I bought that massive suitcase, to pack my few clothes, and my trampled dignity. When I said I wanted a divorce, everyone around the table laughed. Julian did too. He sat at the head of the table holding his wine glass, looking at me with amusement, as if waiting to watch a comedy show. It wasn't until they finished their previous conversation that they remembered what I had said about the divorce. Julian's best friend Marcus spoke first. "Clara, you should count your blessings." "Divorce? If it weren't for Julian, who would even know your name?" Then the rest of the group started throwing insults at me, one after another, each worse than the last. "Yeah, Clara. Think about it. You were just a daycare assistant when Julian noticed you. He gave you status, used his connections to get you promoted, and when you weren't happy, he bought a whole preschool just so you could be the director. What, now that you're well-fed, you're going to bite the hand that feeds you and look down on Julian? And everything on you, the gold jewelry, the BMW you drive, the latest iPhone, which of these didn't come from Julian's pocket? Don't be so ungrateful, all right?" They were right. Julian had indeed given me everything. But it was a transaction from the very beginning. When he wanted to please me and get benefits from me, he spared no expense. I didn't force him to do any of it. Besides, I had suffered endless humiliation in this marriage. Yet, I had never said a single bad word about him. In front of others, to maintain his alpha male image, I always acted like a submissive, quiet wife. But him? He either degraded me at every turn, or let his friends look down on me. The higher his image soared, the cheaper my status became. I didn't understand why he had to do this. In the beginning, his friends respected me, even putting me on a pedestal because of his status. Why couldn't we be equals? Why did I always have to be a step below him? The more I thought about it, the more wronged I felt. I stood up, wanting to leave. Anyway, I had said what I needed to say. Once I packed up, I would see him at the courthouse. But though I wanted to leave, someone wouldn't let me. With a single look from Julian, one of his lackeys blocked me at the door. Julian swirled the wine in his glass, ran his eyes up and down my body, and said, "Sure, we can get a divorce. I haven't cheated and I haven't abused you. Return everything I bought for you and we'll sign the papers." He was convinced I wouldn't dare to go through with it. So he used every disgusting method to pressure me. I said, "Even in a standard divorce, your assets are partly mine. So the things you bought that I wear are mine too." After I said that, Julian let out a sarcastic laugh. "Ha, married for a few years, and you didn't learn anything else, but you sure learned how to bite." I didn't want to waste my breath on him. I took a step to leave, but his lackey hadn't received the command to let me go, so he still blocked the exit. Furious, I raised my hand and slapped the man hard across the face. The force of the slap was so strong that my own body trembled slightly. Startled, Julian stood up and finally gestured for the man to back off. When I got home, Leo thought Julian was back and quickly shut his computer in fear. But when he realized it was just me, he muttered a curse under his breath and went right back to playing his game. I didn't nag him like I usually did. Instead, I went straight to the master bedroom. I started packing my everyday clothes into the suitcase. I also packed up all the gold jewelry Julian had given me. I packed until midnight. After making sure Leo was asleep, Julian finally came home. He was being supported by a couple of his friends. When I opened the door, Julian's eyes were incredibly bloodshot. The man who had insulted me at the dinner table earlier said, "Clara, Julian was crying pretty hard just now. Don't make jokes about divorce ever again." I ignored him and didn't offer to take over helping Julian. I just let them dump him onto the sofa. Once the man left, Julian seemed to sober up a bit. He wrapped his arms around my back and murmured, "Clara, come here and help me undress. Tonight, I'm going to make you cry, you disobedient little thing. Let's see if you ever dare mention divorce again." As he spoke, he started unbuttoning my top from behind. I slammed my elbow into him, pushing him away, and stood up straight. Seeing how drunk he was, I didn't say much. He wouldn't listen anyway. I went to sleep in the guest bedroom. The next morning, I made a simple breakfast. Once the Italian tutor arrived for Leo, I grabbed my suitcase and drove back to my mother's house. The gray gravel driveway of my mother's small house in the suburban outskirts of Clifton was wet from the morning dew. I pulled the rental SUV to a stop under the low, sprawling branches of the old elm tree. The silence of the area was the first thing that hit me. No humming, central ventilation systems, no high-end security cameras blinking from the gutters, and no sound of multiple foreign languages being spat out like venomous needles from the breakfast table. I stepped out of the car, my heels sinking slightly into the soft, damp earth, and pulled my massive suitcase from the trunk. My mother opened the wooden front door before I could even reach the porch. She was wearing her old faded floral apron, her hair tied back in a messy bun. But the moment she saw my pale, exhausted face and the giant suitcase at my feet, the warm smile on her face froze. She ran down the wooden steps, her hands shaking as she grabbed my arms. "Clara, what's wrong? What happened? Did you have an argument with Julian?" 10 years ago, she was the one who had patted my shoulder and told me, "Clara, you are too soft, too indecisive. Julian is a strong, capable man. He'll make sure you're always protected." "Mom," I whispered, my voice raw and cracking, "I'm divorcing him." My mother looked at my swollen cheek, the faint, red mark where Julian's lackey had blocked me at the door, and her eyes instantly welled with a deep, painful guilt. She didn't ask about the preschool, she didn't ask about the BMW, and she didn't mention Julian's high social status. She simply pulled me into a tight, warm hug, her shoulders shaking as she wept against my shoulder. "I'm sorry, Clara," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry. I thought I was sending you to a castle. I didn't know I was locking you in a dungeon." I buried my face in her shoulder, and for the first time in 5 years the tears came. They were hot, thick and silent, washing away the lingering dread in my chest. I was finally out of his house. At 9 a.m., the modern concrete and glass mansion of the Vance family was silent. Julian woke up on the leather sofa, his head throbbing with a massive, alcohol-induced migraine. He rubbed his temples, his throat dry, his voice raspy, as he called out to the kitchen, "Clara, get me my ginger tea, and bring my dry-cleaned suit." No one answered. The house was cold, smelling faintly of stale red wine and the expensive cigars his friends had smoked the night before. Julian frowned, sitting up on the sofa. He walked toward the kitchen, expecting to see me preparing his breakfast while quietly managing Leo's study schedule. But the kitchen was completely dark. The coffee maker was cold, the counter clean and bare. "Clara," he called again, his voice carrying a sharp, dangerous edge as he walked toward the master bedroom. The guest bedroom door was wide open. The closet was stripped of all my everyday clothes, leaving only a few empty hangers clattering against each other in the draft. And sitting right in the center of his study desk, arranged in a neat, clinical line, were the supplementary credit cards he had issued to me, cut perfectly in half. Beside them lay my signed resignation letter from the preschool directorship and a finalized copy of the divorce agreement. Julian's face went from pale to a deep, furious purple. He snatched the credit cards, throwing them into the trash can. "A tantrum," he muttered to himself, his chest heaving under his silk shirt. "She's just trying to play hard to get, because of what happened at the dinner. She'll be back in 2 days. She doesn't even have a job without me." He dialed my number. "The number you have dialed is currently switched off or out of coverage." He tried to message me on WeChat, blocked. On Instagram, blocked. Julian let out a cold, mocking laugh. He immediately called his secretary. "Mr. Vance," the secretary answered. "Cancel the lease on Clara's BMW," Julian ordered, his voice cold as ice. "And notify the board of the preschool that the director position is currently vacant. I want to see how long she can survive on her mother's pension." He believed he was the god of my world, the one who held the keys to my survival. He didn't realize that the unemployed week daycare assistant he had married 7 years ago had spent the last 3 years quietly building her own independent educational consulting firm under her maiden name, saving every penny of her personal earnings in an offshore account he didn't even know existed. 3 weeks passed. The divorce proceedings had begun, but they were handled entirely by my legal team, led by Marcus Vance, the most feared corporate and family attorney in the city, who happened to be a close childhood friend of my father. Julian's attempt to freeze my personal assets had failed spectacularly. Not only did my independent firm hold more than enough liquidity to cover my legal costs, but my lawyers had also initiated a forensic audit of the Vance Group's accounts. We uncovered that Julian had been systematically siphoning funds from our joint household accounts to pay for his private apartment downtown, the one he shared with his various business associates. Worse, without me there to act as the quiet, submissive buffer between him and our son, the mansion had turned into a living hell. Leo's tutors had all resigned. Julian's aggressive, demanding nature, combined with Leo's unmanageable, arrogant behavior, had driven away 3 elite language instructors in less than 2 weeks. Leo's grades had plummeted, and his school had recently issued a warning regarding his cyberbullying of other children in class. On the morning of our first court mediation, I arrived at the courthouse. I was dressed in a sleek, double-breasted white wool suit, my hair swept up in an elegant chignon, my posture perfect and poised. I looked healthy, successful, and completely out of his reach. Julian sat on the opposite side of the table, flanked by his lawyers. He looked haggard, his eyes bloodshot, his collar loose. Beside him sat Leo, who looked small, sullen, and incredibly messy in his expensive school blazer. "Clara," Julian said, his voice carrying a desperate, aggressive edge as he leaned forward. "Let's stop this ridiculous show. If you come home today, I'll let you keep the preschool. I'll even let you keep the BMW. But you must drop the custody claim for Leo. He is my son. He carries my blood." "Mom," Leo suddenly piped up, his voice high and shrill, using his favorite German insult to get his father's approval. "Mama ist eine Schlange. Sie verdient kein Geld. Mom is a snake. She doesn't deserve any money." He looked up at Julian, waiting for the familiar, indulgent smile. But Julian didn't smile. My lawyer, Marcus Vance, slowly slid a digital tablet across the table, connecting it to the boardroom's projector screen. "Mr. Vance," Marcus said, his voice carrying the cold, clinical weight of the law. "This is the smart home audio log we retrieved from your residence, recorded over the last 12 months. The screen flickered, and then the high-definition recordings of Julian and Leo's domestic conversations began to play. "Leo, how do you say mom's cooking tastes awful in Korean?" The translation is, "My wife is just like an old-fashioned Japanese housewife. Daddy, are Japanese housewives as ugly and submissive as mommy? You'll understand when you grow up." The room went completely, suffocatingly quiet. The court-appointed mediator, a stern, 40-something female judge, stared at the screen, her face turning a cold, furious shade of pale. She looked at Julian, then at the small, trembling Leo. "Mr. Vance," the mediator said, her voice dropping into a freezing register, "you have systematically indoctrinated your 6-year-old child to verbally abuse and humiliate his own mother using multiple languages as a psychological weapon. This is just language practice." Julian stammered, his fingers shaking, as he tried to grab the tablet. "It's a translation exercise. We were just playing. This is a severe case of psychological abuse and parental alienation." The mediator cut him off, her tone absolute. "By order of the family court, Mr. Vance, your sole custody rights are suspended, effective immediately. Leo will be placed under the temporary guardianship of his mother, pending a full psychological evaluation." "No, no," Julian roared, standing up so fast his leather chair crashed into the wall. "She's a commoner. She's a daycare assistant. She can't raise my son. He's an elite. The child's elite education has already been suspended by the school board, Mr. Vance," my lawyer said, sliding the corporate audit files to the mediator. "Due to your financial irregularities, the Vance Group's assets have been frozen. Under a federal preservation order, you have nothing left to pay for his tutors." The legal battle ended in a complete, systematic ruin of the Vance family. Julian was stripped of his corporate titles, his assets liquidated to pay off his debts and my settlement. His friends who had once stood beside him, laughing at my background, completely distanced themselves, throwing him under the bus to save their own company's shares. He was left with absolutely nothing. 2 months later, the spring had come to the city, washing the streets in a bright, warm light. I stood on the balcony of my new, spacious apartment downtown, watching the sunset over the river. My consulting firm had just secured a major partnership with the State Board of Education, and my name was respected across the entire academic community. The door to the balcony opened, and Leo walked out. He was dressed in a simple, clean cotton shirt, his posture no longer arrogant, his face carrying a quiet, tentative hesitation. Over the last 2 weeks of his therapy, he had slowly begun to realize that the stupid mother he had mocked was the only one who had stayed up to hold him when he had night terrors. "Mommy," he whispered, his voice small as he reached out to grab my hand. I looked down at him. I didn't push him away. I knelt down, wrapping my arms around his small shoulders, pulling him close against my chest. "I'm sorry, Mommy," he sobbed, his tears spilling onto my collarbone. "I won't say those words anymore. I won't do it again." "I know, Leo," I whispered, my voice soft and filled with a deep, genuine peace. "We're going to learn a new language now. The language of respect." The gold-plated chains of my past had been completely destroyed, and the sky above us was finally, beautifully mine. I stood on the terrace of my new office, looking out at the endless horizon, my hand holding my son's hand, my heart completely free of the dark, suffocating room where they had tried to bury me. We were finally, beautifully home.